Well, now to the main event. I'm sure many of you have often heard that word-of-mouth advertising is the best form of advertising that you could ever have, and there's a lot of truth to that. And I remember growing up selling traditional media and such, and we kind of use a phrase of rule of 250, that everybody knew 250 people about, that they could invite to a funeral, to a wedding, that they would have as their sphere of influence in that word-of-mouth advertising. So if you ticked somebody off and they weren't real happy, you always were like, well, maybe there's only 250 people max that would probably hear that. What online reviews is doing is changing that. Now people are taking the advice not from family and friends, but from strangers. And that's where this whole review system that's doing online is it's kind of changing the whole aspects of word-of-mouth advertising. But anyway, to speak more on that is Matt Weber, and I'm going to do a little introduction and bio for him. Matt Weber is a national digital speaker who has, through various different Google programs, has trained thousands of businesses across the country and now even internationally in Canada on how to use various digital tools to grow their business. Matt is also the president and CEO of Roar Internet Marketing in Altamont Springs. He's a graduate of UCF with a master's in communication, and he maintains many Google certifications. Roar Internet Marketing consistently maintains its status as a Google partner agency. Roar Internet Marketing works with many local doctors, regional and national healthcare organizations, and some of those you might be familiar with, like Tenet Healthcare, Vascular Vein Centers, Family Physicians Group, and other individual doctors like the plastic surgeon, Dr. Scott Rotatori, Dr. Thibault, who does clinical trials and psychiatric services, Dr. Barusco for hair restoration, Dr. Collette, advanced ENT, and many, many others related to the healthcare industry, even including Chuck's website with TWI Healthcare. And as president of Roar, Matt is responsible for customer satisfaction, overall production, product development, creative direction, and most importantly, the coffee selection in the break room. Please welcome Matt Weber.
Good morning, everyone. This morning I'm going to do two things. Number one, I'm going to talk about the business impact and the actual financial results of your online reputation. The second thing that I'm going to do, if you have some paper with you, is outline a three-step plan for improving your online reputation. It's tough for medical practices to deal with this online reputation because now, today, reviews can be left in so many places. There's so many places for us to monitor, to look at it, and every time a patient turns around, there's another place asking them for a review about your practice. So it's very difficult to get a handle on this subject. But the importance of doing so can't be understated. A recent study showed that 70% of consumers base purchase decisions on both goods and services on the recommendations of strangers. And it's that last word on this sentence that I want you to focus in on. Strangers. See, we've known for 100 years that word of mouth is the most effective form of advertising. There's been a word of mouth national conference for over 75 years. But historically, that was limited to friends and family that we leaned on for recommendations as to what restaurant to go to or what business to use. But today, we're very comfortable taking the opinion of people we have never met, will never get to know, as one source of information to buy or not buy a product. I'm sure many of you have gone to Amazon to read the review of a product before you bought it, even if you aren't buying it from Amazon. And who are those people you're relying on? Complete and total strangers, right? Now, is this problem going to get better or worse? Well, the same study showed that when we look at millennials as they get older, 80% of them said they rely on strangers for purchase recommendations. So the trend is even getting worse for us. Now, some of you might be saying, hey, that makes a lot of sense for a car dealer or for my auto repair guy or for a vacuum. But this has absolutely nothing to do with medical practice. This doesn't relate to health practices. And actually, the Journal of the Medical Association answered this question a long time ago, back in 2014. And they surveyed potential patients and said, what value do you place on those doctor rating websites? And 40% of the people said they're very important in my selection of a doctor. And 59% said they're somewhat important. So you don't have to be very good at math to figure out what percentage of the population does not think there's any value in those doctor recommendation sites. So it's a significant issue and has a direct financial consequence, because to us, as we watch this happen in the real world, reviews have become a silent business killer. Think about it for just a second. Somebody goes online, finds a discomforting, doesn't even have to be bad, a discomforting review about a medical practice, and they decide not to take the next step. They decide not to go to the website, or they decide not to pick up the phone and call. How do you find out about it? We don't get the phone call where someone says, hey, by the way, I was thinking about coming in to be a patient, but I read an online review that wasn't very comfortable for me, so I decided not to come. We don't get that phone call. So a lot of practices look around and they say, gee, I'm doing the same kind of marketing that I was doing before, the same kind of advertising, and yet I'm not getting the same results. Why? Because somewhere out there, there's a review that's getting in between your practice and the marketing and the advertising that you're trying to execute. So we know it has the potential to be a huge negative effect. We also know when you turn it around, the benefits are enormous. So one study looked at restaurants in particular and said if a restaurant could increase its review by just a half a star, just a half, it increased its potential to sell at the restaurant by 30 to 49%. So look at the financial driver reviews are having on all types of businesses, including health practices. And if you doubt for a minute how peer-driven review crazy we've become as a society, two women decided to launch an app early last year called People. And the sole purpose of the app is to review people. So you and I could have lunch together, and if I happen to pick up the wrong fork in eating my salad, you could pull out your app, your People app, and you could review me right then and right there. At the end of this presentation, if you had the People app, you could review me, and then if somebody else was going to think about hiring me as a speaker, they could just look me up on People and find out. So they had a beta test of People in November of 2015, and at the time, the only thing I needed to review you was your email address. If I knew your email address, I could publish a review of you on People, and in that beta test, that did not go over very well. The beta tester said, that's crazy. Why would we ever want someone to publish a review without our permission, about ourselves, simply because they just had our email address? In fact, if you go to the Facebook page of People, you can still see some fairly venomous comments about People and that effect that this could have on society if we just let people review other people with no barriers. They've since changed the model on this, and that's why it's been delayed. But how much money do you think these two women have been able to raise from a capital standpoint for an app that reviews people? How much money do you think they've been able to raise capital-wise so far? Over $500,000 for this app with no business plan, no monetization. They don't know how they're going to make money on it, and yet they've raised over $500,000 to develop the app. That's how peer review crazy we've become as a society. There's another business driver to this, though, as we kind of break this down into smaller pieces. On the search side, reviews can help the practice get found. And I did a couple searches to prepare for the presentation. And this is a search that I did for Family Doctor in Altamont Springs. And if you look very closely, you can see that two of the practices listed here have stars. And you can imagine, what does the consumer do when they see that? Where do their eyes go? They go to the stars, as yours would when you go to eBay or Amazon or anything else that you do. So the stars are kind of a magnet to get patients on that, because people will gravitate to them. The other thing you'll begin to notice, and while it's not an absolute, when you do a lot of searches, it's not uncommon, and this is not going to be a surprise, to see that the practices that have more reviews are, in general, higher in the rankings. So these reviews now are influencing whether or not people discover us, let alone make a judgment about whether we do it well or not do it well. They're opening the door to people finding our practice. And some reviews are better than others. Today, there's about 18 different platforms that Google looks at the reviews and will publish them on this. But as you can see in this example, I think I did Podiatrist Oviedo on this one, these two practices have reviews, but the reviews are not on the websites that Google pulls the star ratings from. So if you look at this, you don't have that same effect. Now let's go to the same, this is urology for Winter Park, and here we've got a practice that does have reviews, but unfortunately on the wrong platform. Here's a practice that has not too many more reviews, but on the right platform. And look at the difference visually. What would you gravitate to if you looked at that on your computer screen? You'd gravitate to the pretty stars, right? So they're a huge business driver in opening the doors to potential patients, and some reviews simply are more valuable than others. So at this point, we know a couple things. We know that bad reviews can invisibly keep people away from our practice. We know that good reviews can be a huge business driver. But I don't want you to focus on the bad reviews for just a second, because there's actually one thing worse than a bad review. Does anybody know what the only thing out there that's worse than a bad review is? Not no reviews, an unanswered bad review. You see, when you look at the research, particularly younger people tend to look at bad reviews and they say, I get it. It's part of the process, right? Good companies have bad reviews. And actually, bad reviews contribute to the authenticity of the whole review scheme. If you went to Amazon, if you saw a product and everything was just 5 stars, you would go, something's not quite right. So bad reviews actually make the whole system more believable. So they're not by themselves really bad, but what's really bad is an unanswered bad review. And I'm hoping you can read this, because I pulled this. This is an actual review, and I'll read just a couple sentences of it. And this person says, if I could give it half a star, and this is for a medical practice, I would. I went there for a consult of my knee. Lady ordered an MRI, told me they'd call me when the results are in. 2 weeks later, I had to call them. They told me nothing was wrong. A month later, I'm still in pain. Then I went somewhere else, and everything was great. And then this uppercase letters, this place is absolutely terrible. My husband started coming here regularly because he was having severe back pain. He saw a doctor for a few months. Once they found the source of the problem, they referred him somewhere else, and he was SOA. Not sure what that stands for. They promised him work notes for all the work he'd been missing, and then the office manager started stonewalling him. Da 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 da. This is completely ridiculous. What would your innate reaction be if you saw these online? Yeah, you're not going, right? There's absolutely no way this would not create some hesitation for you. Not possible. You're going to look somewhere else. The mistake here, though, is that the practice didn't respond to it, because here's a negative review, not quite as emotionally charged, but the person writes and says, hey, I've been there 5 times. First visit was fine. Second, waited over an hour. Other 2 appointments were disappointing. I had to go request copy. And then look what happens. The practice owner responds to it and says, hey, I'm really sorry to hear about this. Thanks for your feedback. We've put in measures to do our best to make sure patient information remains confidential. Any questions, contact me at drsam@ da-da-da. Wow, what a difference in the tonality of how you would receive this. Right? This by itself is still bad. This combined with this actually becomes good and becomes valuable. So the single worst part of the review system is not a bad review, but an unanswered bad review is the real practice killer. So here's our 3-step treatment plan that I hope you'll take note of. 3 specific steps to get a hold of this. Step 1 is monitoring reviews. If you don't know they're out there, then they become that silent killer. And there's 2 ways to monitor for reviews. There's some paid products and there's some free products. Let's talk about the free ones first, and then we're going to talk about managing reviews and soliciting reviews. This is our 3-point plan, and we're going to go into each one of these. So for review monitoring, a free product, super simple, is called Google Alerts, and you can find it right now at google.com/alerts. And when you go there, you're going to get a screen that looks like this, and you can tell Google, what is the phrase that you want me to look for? And this could be your practice name, your doctor's name. And then you can tell Google, how often do you want to be alerted? Do you want to look at the entire web, just images? What language do you want to know? What region in the United States? Just Florida? Just Orlando? So you get to determine how often do you want Google to email you when it finds anywhere on the internet something published about your company, which is going to be reviews. When reviews show up on a public site, it's going to trigger this. It's going to send you this. Now, this is a good tool, but it's not it's not a 100% effective tool because reviews have become such a cottage industry. There's now an industry behind reviews. Some of the review platforms have blocked Google from crawling them because they want to sell you their review monitoring platform. So this will get about 85, maybe 80% of the activity that's out there on the internet, but it's going to miss some because some platforms by design have shut out Google. A second free tool is called socialmention.com. Because the next thing we're going to see about reviews in the future are not reviews left on websites like Healthgrades or Rate a Doc. It's going to become just the social media. If you're ticked off about a doctor, what do people do? They tweet about it. They post it on Facebook. So they're not on a review platform per se, and while they're not leaving a review in the strictest sense of the word, you can imagine if somebody's got 500 followers or 600 followers and they tweet, "Oh God, I just had to wait 2 hours at Dr. So-and-so's office." That's being heard now, and that's being spread. The only way for you to find that is to go to a website like socialmention.com, and I would recommend that you use the advanced search, don't use the basic search, or else you get a lot of stuff. And you can say, hey, I want to find mentions of this phrase, again, from this country and this language, and drill down on it to find out who's tweeting about this. Now, socialmention.com is a business platform, so once you leave your email address, they are going to market the heck out of you. Whereas with Google Alerts, when you sign up for Google Alerts, you're not going to get any kind of promotional messaging from Google. But two free tools that should be in the arsenal or the handbag of every medical practice. Now, there's lots of paid tools. As I mentioned, the reviews themselves have become a business. There are platforms now, and I think we researched 4 of them in 2015 alone, that come up simply for the purpose of helping you manage these reviews. And one of the longer lasting ones is called reviewpush.com. You'll have another one at reviewtrackers.com. And then the newest one is tracker.com. What all of these have in common is that you'll pay your $29.95 a month or $49.95 a month, put in the keywords that you want to monitor, and it will crawl all of those review sites, send you an email, and then where they're going to vary is some of them now will take a look at the review and they will look at the content of it with an algorithm that looks at the number of syllables in the words and the tonality and looking for words like criticizing and late, etc. And then they'll alert you to whether or not it's a really negative review that you should respond to right away or a positive review. They'll actually grade the reviews for you to give you a handle on how quickly you should react to them. But all of these are going to run you somewhere between $29.95 and $49.95 a month. They also will play a role in review solicitation that I'm going to talk about in just a minute. But our first plan of attack, our first part of our treatment plan is we have to monitor for reviews. And I'm going to suggest to you at this point that if you don't have somebody in your company who has a line in their job description that says, responsible for the management of online reviews, that's coming, and that's something that you're going to need to consider. Somebody needs to own this in your practice. I believe that pretty soon we're going to have jobs in our organizations that are dedicated completely to review, and it's happening already. Many, many large companies, auto dealers, have a single person, sole purpose in life is dedicated to managing reviews. So our second step is review management. So you see the review. It's not good. What do? How you react is going to determine whether that's the really bad situation that I identified in that one slide or the not too bad situation because you responded to it. First hint, really got to strive for a 24-hour response. When you look at how many eyeballs some of these sites get, in particular those Google local listings, you should not underestimate how many eyeballs they get. So leaving something unresponded to for a long time is just accumulating more and more people looking at that review. So you should always strive for a 24-hour response. The second thing is, let's prepare in advance because you most often need an account with some of these key review sites. You can't dispute or respond to a claim on your Google local listing unless you've claimed your practice's Google local listing. You just can't come in as an outsider and say, I'm going to respond to that review. So all of those platforms that I showed on the first slide that you have in the handout, you'll need to create an account in the name of your practice on all those platforms. If not, you can't unlock the door to get in to reply to them. So don't wait until you see your first negative review before you say, oh my God, how do we respond to this? Let's set up our plan in advance, make sure we have the accounts, make sure that the person who's going to respond to these reviews knows the login and the password to those accounts so we can get in and respond to them. The third, and most important with a medical practice, is you've got to have a scripted first response. It has to be word for word. It's got to exist somewhere in your practice that say, this is what we say word for word, because we get into some HIPAA considerations very, very quickly here if we get off script. Not as important for some of our non-medical clients, but for medical clients, this is key. And so this is what a typical first response would look like. Hey, we're very sorry you're not satisfied with your experience at name of practice. Your concerns are extremely important to us. We've assigned a patient care specialist specifically to your situation. Please contact, and I'm going to recommend that you create a special email address. And that email address may be patient concerns at or patient specialist at, because that in alone tells the reviewer that an extra step, there's somebody there who's really getting paid to address this situation. So please contact that email address right away so we can work to resolve your concern offline and protect your patient privacy. And you'll see that just about all of the practices who are really doing this use some version of these words. We're going to do this offline, and we're going to protect your patient privacy as a way to safeguard against any potential legal actions that could happen. We're going to make overt steps to try to get this conversation off the internet and get it offline. You, of course, cannot make any reference to who the person is, even if you know it is. You can't make any reference to what you think their condition is. Can't do any of that on that. This nice, innocuous, generic statement says you're concerned, you're acting quickly, but you want to be able to get the situation offline. And that needs to be somewhere in your practice that when someone responds, copy and paste. Whew, out it goes. The holy grail of reviews is when you seek an amended review. That's the holy grail. Most people are receptive to the fact that if you address their concern, to go back in and they can publish a reply to their own review that says, I just want to let you know that the practice contacted me and they did blank on that. That's the holy grail. Think of the impact that on future prospects when they see somebody had a problem, your practice addressed it, and the person writes back and says, everything turned out great, thank you very much, this is fantastic. That is better than any paid ad you could find. There's no magazine ad, there's no television ad, radio ad that is more powerful than that. So when you have this process set up, the end goal should be to seek an amended review on that. And when you look on the internet, you'll see there's quite a few out there. Third part of our treatment plan is review solicitation. A lot of practices, a lot of businesses now are getting it. They're getting that profits lean on reviews. In fact, yesterday, one of our employees had to have his car towed from the office. And after they took the vehicle away, the guy gets out of the tow truck and hands him this. And the card says, give us a review. This is from A&AD Towing. Satisfied with our service? We are a review-driven business, spelled wrong. Please take a moment to support us on one of the following sites. Hand it to him. Here's how to do it on Yelp. Here's how to do it on Google. Here's how to do it on Facebook. Step by step on that. Gets out of the tow truck, hands our employee that before they leave. Right? So they get it. They get the fact that their finances, their profits, their business are dependent on these peer-driven reviews, so they're going to control it and not be at the whim of people leaving reviews. They're going to solicit reviews to have more positive reviews than negative reviews. Well, how do you do that? One way to do solicit reviews, we're going to solicit the reviews so we can control them so that they don't control us. And there's two ways to solicit reviews. And this, I think, is going to become more and more popular. Those third-party platforms that I talked about in the beginning of the presentation, they offer a third-party page. So when you send out an email that says, thank you very much for being a patient, hope you were satisfied, we'd love for you to help other people who were in the situation you were in when they were considering a practice like us. Could you leave a review on these 3 sites like this card did? But instead of directing people directly to Yelp or Facebook like this business did, you direct them to a third-party page. And that third-party page looks at what they say and makes an algorithmic judgment. Good review, bad review, neutral, based on the words, the content, the number of words, etc. And if it's good, then the platform then emails that person and says, hey, so glad you were satisfied with our service. There are more people that can benefit from this review. You can help them if you also leave a review here. If the review is negative, it writes back and says, wow, we're going to put somebody on this. We're going to tend to you right away. See what it's doing? It's filtering out. It's creating an intermediary step so that you can make a judgment as to whether or not it's a good or a bad review. And if it's good, then publish it on places on the internet. But if it's a negative review, try to squelch it before they get to those places on the internet. The disadvantage of this system is how hard are people really going to work to leave a review, right? So if you get them to leave it once and then they get an email back that says, hey, great, thanks so much, could you also leave it here? Kind of at that point, they're like, yeah, I mean, I think I've done as much work for you as I'm willing to do. But believe it or not, it does work. And there are some people that are so passionate about the service they get, they do it, but the real benefit is you've filtered out the negative reviews. Email's also a great way to just direct them to these major review sites. So you have that little bit of a risk, right? And all of our clients say the same thing. Our clients always say, Matt, couldn't we possibly poke somebody who's not happy? And couldn't they go and leave a review? Yes. But in totality, 10 new reviews, of which one of them may not be positive, is far more financially profitable than 0 reviews or 1 negative review that's unattended or just 1 bad review by itself. It's the totality of the effort that drives the business, not the individual review itself. So this definitely does work. The challenge here is that most of the review sites are constantly changing how to leave a review. Because what do bad guys do? Bad guys write a piece of software that says, I'm going to go to Yelp and I'm going to automatically write a review. That's what bad guys spend their life doing. So to combat that, Yelp, Google, they're all changing the specific steps. So somebody has to stay on top of what are the specific directions on how to leave a review. If you've ever left a review on Google, you know that it changes at least once every 2.5 months. The button was up here, now it's down there. You have to log in first. Now you don't have to log in first. Now you log in after the review. You used to log in before the review. Always changing. And part of the reason why it's changing is to combat the bad guys. There's a way to do this wrong. And malpractice in the area of review solicitation would include these, fake reviews. And it's very tempting. And there are people who are in the business, by the way, of reputation enhancement, I believe they call it. So some of you have gotten emails from companies that are reputation enhancement, and they kind of nebulously talk about some of these great things that they're going to do to position you more favorably online. When you kind of dig through the contract a little bit, you realize that what they are really doing is faking reviews on that. And so the platforms now, because remember, this is a big business, every day there's something going on, the platforms have to figure out which are the real reviews and which are the fake reviews. And some of you may remember that Yelp faced a lot of litigation over potentially fake reviews and or giving bonus advertising slots and then taking away bad reviews. So what Yelp did in response to that is they've invested a lot of money into the system that authenticates reviews on Yelp on that. So when you publish a review on Yelp right now, it may not show up right away because the algorithm is running through a bunch of variables. How often did you log into Yelp before? Have you ever left a review on Yelp before? Can they determine from some of the location-based information in your phone that you were ever near the place that you left a review? All of that is being now calculated to determine whether or not the review is authentic. On the Google side now, they're recruiting certified local Google reviewers. You can sign up, you can be a certified Google local reviewer. They put you through an offline little 20-minute class, and you can become, because it helps them vet out who are the real reviewers and who are the fake reviewers. A lot of practices have a tablet out at the front office or in the practice, and they say, well, once the session is over, they hand the tablet and they say, could you leave a review? What the platforms are saying is, oh my gosh, we see 9 reviews come from the same IP address, and that's setting off triggers, right? So that's now being labeled as fake reviews. So that practice no longer works as it did at one time. So it doesn't help, and that's why they stopped it at Home Depot. Remember, there was a time at Home Depot you could go up to a little tablet and you could leave reviews, and they've stopped that because that doesn't work. You also can't compensate people for reviews. It's a harder one to catch, but if they do catch you, things are not going to look good for you. You just can't offer anybody anything. You know, whether it's a free coupon, a discount, an elevated level of service, you just can't compensate people for reviews. So some action steps I'd like you to consider when you get back to the office as a result of this presentation. It's highly worth doing a Google search for your doctor name, including the word reviews, and I would put it in quotes in just the way that I'm presenting it here. And then also do the same thing for your practice name if your practice name is mildly different than your doctor name. Create that forwarding email address for review management that I suggested. The value of that forwarding address is that semantically it should have good words in it, right? Like patient specialist, patient manager at, it says something. But also make sure that that forwarding address gets sent to multiple people. So when you set up your review monitoring, don't have the review monitoring set to one person who may be on vacation, maybe out of the office for a reason. It's a forwarding email address that gets directed to multiple people. This is such a critical issue. You don't want this to get stuck in somebody's email box for a day or two. Create a template for the response, and I think we've given you a pretty good start on that with what you have in your handout, but you do not want anybody ad-libbing or extemporaneously creating these responses. Everybody has to follow the script, and that's a gotta. There's just no leniency on that one. And finally, set up your Google alerts so that after you do your Google search today, that you have some routine system of finding out what's being said about your practice. And if all this causes a headache, call Roy in the morning and we'll take care of it for you. All right? I think I have just a couple minutes left for questions if that generated any questions.
Yes, and we'll want to make sure that we get those questions and answers in the video, so I'll come around with the microphone, assuming that the microphone is working. Any questions?
In the back.
You were talking about these paid services. Can you give us an idea what the paid services average cost besides your $29 a month?
Yeah, actually they are going to be
for
about
management of it.
Yeah, they're going to be about 40 for the paid platforms, like the ones I had on the screen. You subscribe to them, and they run anywhere from $39.95 per physical location to some of them go as high as $79.95 per physical location. And the difference in the cost is there's some really basic ones that just do the review monitoring, and then the more expensive ones run the whole gamut from review monitoring to review management. They've got some templated responses that they've put in there that they show has had results. To they actually are these review solicitation platforms where you upload your patient email address into these platforms, and the platform sends out the email, and it's got templates for the email, and then it drives those reviews to that third-party page that I talked about. Then the platform judges whether it's good or bad, and then it automatically sends the follow-up email that says, hey, thanks for that great review. Could you actually leave a review here? The value of the platform is they continually look at what are the steps necessary to leave a review on Yelp. You don't have to worry about making sure that you have the correct steps. They do all that. The email is going to do all that for you on that. So it's kind of a turnkey system on that, and that's the difference in the cost. Kevin? Oh, Dorothy, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll go to Kevin.
One of the things that strikes me is whenever I look for a doctor online, I'll often see that there's like Healthgrades or all these other things come up that have ratings within them that are different than even Yelp or Google and so on and so forth. And also, I also find doctors' offices are usually on the 3rd or 4th page if you can find them, their websites. So at some level, the websites they're doing are just not ranking, let alone they're also dealing with these other specific industry or medical practice issues that are going on. Can you address some of those?
Yeah, medical practices have more of a challenge than the average business because of the number of places they have to manage these reviews. And as consumers, what's going to happen to us is that health graders or located doc, they're going to get to the top of search engine results listings more so than an individual practice because of lots of benefits they bring. So then they're now the intermediary, right? They're the middleman on that. Angie's List is now getting into medical, which is hard for me to get my brain around, that the place you go to get a plumber and an air conditioner is now going to be the place that you can go to find your family physician, but they're getting into that. So the takeaway is that medical practices have to get into this much deeper than the average business does. You're right, because there's no way for the medical practice to know that as a consumer, I fell into health graders and you fell into Yelp on that because of how you did it. There's just no way to tell that. So they have to win on all those fronts. It's like battle planning and knowing that you got to win this front, that front, and that front, and that front on that. It's a challenge. It's going to take a dedicated effort, dedicated resources.
And while we're on that subject, may I just add that I've heard that Healthgrades and Vitals, those reviews also could lead to what type of level of compensation the doctor's office is getting, whereas some of the other reviews don't necessarily lead to the compensation, but it's the driver in terms of when people are searching for them. So there's even more incentive to be careful of these reviews.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that we, last year I think it was, we built a website for some hospitalists, and the sole purpose of the website was to get in front of negative reactions on behalf of patients, to not wait until the day when the patient left the hospital and then say, how was everything? We built this website that had games in it and weather forecasts, and it was also a way for the doctors to communicate for the patients, but to give them some outlet to vent about it before it got to the point that they were actually leaving the review on that. So there's a non-internet component of this that is a basic business practice of this, which is really got to attend to customer satisfaction, patient satisfaction, and giving people an outlet to talk about what may have not worked for them well before this frustration bubbles up. Because by the time you leave a review, you're pretty angry at that point, right? I mean, most of these situations could have been resolved if somebody just would have interceded earlier. And I think that's true for all of the businesses that we deal with.
Good morning. My question is again about the reviews. What level of confidentiality is there that's afforded to the person that's presenting the review? I worked with a group that was a specialty clinic, so that any review that was associated with the clinic indicated that that person or someone who knew that person well was a patient. And I'm thinking, certainly for the business that they were in, folks wouldn't want to necessarily tell the rest of the world that they were actually a patient.
Yeah, and a lot of our clients ask that same question, by the way, and it's a really good one. Most of our clients have landed on the position that said, if they volunteered it, and they took the first step and put it on the internet, we're okay with responding in a generic, innocuous manner and not referencing the condition or the date that they were there. So most of my clients, and I do have one that has not taken this position, have said, hey, if they took the first step, then we're okay.
You did sort of address this, but I also agree with you about being proactive. So are you saying that currently physician groups could actually send out an email to be proactive to every client, having them actually rate their service, for instance, and based on the response, either drive back a reply that has that pre-published paragraph saying, to please contact us directly, we'd love to protect your privacy and discuss this, or say, that's great news, here are some sites that you may consider publishing your review for us. Is that something automated through like SurveyMonkey or something that some of the offices can use?
Yeah, some patient management programs have this functionality built into it, and some patient portals have this functionality built into it. So that on the date of the patient, when you check off and say the patient did arrive, which then triggers a bunch of other things, it also triggers an email to them that says, hey, so glad you came in, hope you enjoyed the experience, we're committed to your continuing care, would you mind sharing your experience with? And then here's where it branches off. Some of the programs land them on a third-party page where they leave the review, and then the review is evaluated, and then a second trigger happens. It says, if it's positive, hey, fantastic, so glad you had a great experience. Would you mind sharing that here? Some of the programs actually then say, could you leave these review on these 3 places, Yelp, Google+, and here's the step-by-step. So there's a lot of automated ways to do it. Patient management programs do it. You can even do this now through Constant Contact. You can even do it now through MailChimp. I think it's better to do it on a that basis, because we do it for our clients on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, but you can imagine that my chances of getting a review from you when you were at the practice a month and a half ago, even if you had a great experience, are less than if I tap you on the shoulder the day after or 2 days after. So utopia would be that you set up an automated program in which they get the solicitation right after their visit. But I have to tell you, the other system works. We have a client that we average somewhere between 10 and 11 reviews when we do a quarterly email blast seeking reviews. And that's from a patient list of around 3,500 to 5,500, I believe, somewhere in there. So 10 to 11 reviews out of that, phenomenal. Huge business driver, huge impact on revenue.
Hey, Matt. Dan O'Connell, MOROF member, and I can't help but empathize with doctors that have to juggle beyond their other things, this thing within their practice. However, as a consumer, a patient, and a marketer, I wanted to comment, or we've talked about it a few times, is the urgency in responding to bad things. And what I see, you know, and I don't have evidence of it, is people tend to pile on. So if there's a bad review and they've had a bad experience, they're going to jump on. So I now understand more fully the need to address it sooner. So again, other than just having a person, are there any facilities or places that will assist you in this as a practice saver?
Either signing up for one of the platforms that I have in the presentation is probably the easiest thing to do. Pay your $29.95 or your $49.95. Still takes a little bit of labor to do it. That's going to be a significant help for most practices. There are companies that will help with this, like we do, that are typically part of a broader range of packages. I don't think it's cost beneficial to pay a third party just to do reviews like Roar. But if you've got an agency that's already assisting you with your paid search and your organic search, then that's a fairly inexpensive additional component to add to that service. So first advice, number one, look at some of these paid platforms that are coming out. They're evolving, they're always getting better. $39.95 a month for that, that's not a lot of money to pay to prevent a bad review, which, as we've mentioned, can be a silent killer to a practice. And if you're a practice with multiple locations, this gets even more challenging, and that's where maybe an agency might be beneficial if you've got multiple locations. The other thing I have to say, and I don't know how to say it and still be polite, is some practices need this more than others. And sometimes it's hard to get the practice to look in the mirror and go, we need this, because they're the results. And if you look at highly elective practices like hair replacement, there's some people out there with some really negative things to say about that. And that may be the unique nature of that particular practice. Not everybody's going to look in the mirror at the end of getting hair replacement done and be satisfied with it, even though the practice did exactly what they told the patient they were going to do. They need to be, those people need to be fully on. Cosmetic surgeons need to be, even if everything goes well, the outcome may not be right. So those practices really need to get behind this.
Hi, I'm Pam Trout. I'm kind of in a good position. I think I just opened my own practice, so I'm still building my website. If we have some paid platforms or even some kind of reliable platforms, if I link that to my website, like have a column with a ticker like, check out some of my reviews, will that then increase the search optimization of my website and put me higher on the list for a Google search? Does that help?
No.
If you link, okay.
Reviews on your website play no role in your organic ranking. I'm going to have an asterisk to that in just a second. But the general answer to your question is no. I also want to point out that some of those third-party platforms that I talked about have what they call a widget or an iframe that you put a piece of code from the platform onto your website so that the reviews that it's collecting over here that it deems are positive are automatically displaying on your website so you don't have to re-input them. It's one of the benefits they offer. So the answer to your question is no. However, I speak a lot in front of search engine optimization experts who look for the very detailed and arcane exceptions out there. So the detailed and arcane exception would be anytime you're adding content to a website that is relevant, it can have a benefit. So if all of your reviews said, you're a great dentist, and I had a great teeth whitening, and they were adding those keyword-rich terms to the site, then that could have a negligible impact. But most testimonials are, hey, that was great service, people treated me well, they were nice people. Those kind of testimonials bring no SEO value.
Any other questions? I think Kim.
I was just searching on my mobile device, a few doctors close by that I know, and the location services are turned on. And it seems like the playing field, or it's a little bit cleaner on the mobile device than it is on the desktop device, in that, there's not as much stuff coming up, and the doctors really are coming up before Vitals or Healthgrades.
Yeah, I can't comment too much about that because, as you know, search engine results are highly personal now. So what you see on your device is based on the time of day, your location, your search experience. So I can't make a lot of absolutes, but to say that a lot of medical practices still don't have responsive websites. So it surprises me that they're beating the directories that have mobile-friendly responsive websites on that. That's a surprising outcome for me. Yeah.
Okay, one more question. And I think the key of all this is that burying your head in the sand like an ostrich is not a good plan.
It's a little bit off topic, but your answer to Kim. So you're telling me if I Google a name, whatever it is, and you Google a name, the answers that are going to come up and the results are going to be different?
Very much so.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay.
So we have, I think, 50 people in the room? If we all went back to our offices and did the same exact search, my guess would be that we'd see 30 to 35 different search engine results.
And I think I've searched for these doctors on this phone before, so that's really related.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so.
Any other questions? We've had a lot this morning, which is awesome. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your
Enjoyed being
time.
with you.